From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there, and welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom right here on Can TV. Well, it was said last night, no man, no woman, not you, Bill, not me, no one has ever been more qualified to be President of the United States than this woman, Hillary Clinton. Now all we have to do is worry about whether she's going to actually accept it after all this, but we'll find that out a bit later on, I'm sure. But of course, the real number, the real thing that everybody cares about now is 270. Are they going to get to 270? Will Donald Trump get there before she does? And that will be the real subject of all the speculation of all these shows for the next, 3 or 4 months or so. And we will be no different because we've got political animals of the highest caliber on the show here today. And I'm referring, of course, to His Majesty Bruce DuMont, a star of stage and screen and YouTube, and the man is multi-platform.
Thank you. By the way, that's I don't know. There was a almost earth-shattering moment last night. The sound that you heard was Dwight D. Eisenhower turning over at his grave when Hillary was described as the most qualified person ever. And I'm sure Barbara Bush turned to George Herbert Walker and said, "George, weren't you this before?" But anyway, I digress.
Well, there is something about history that history rarely goes back more than a week or two these days. So,
right.
Yeah. And Dr. Steve Edwards is here, the executive director of nothing less than the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago.
It's good to
now,
be
of course,
back.
we all know him when he was just a talk show host, but man, have you graduated. So great to have you both here. And I should mention, of course, Beyond the Beltway, I almost forgot, Beyond the Beltway with Bruce DuMont, available on, as I said, multiple platforms.
Right. We're everywhere now.
All you have to do is just speak the word Beyond the Beltway, and an image of you will appear.
That's right. That's what I've been working on. Been working on for 40 years.
That's true.
50 years.
On your Google Glass. So that's where we're at. We have a convention that was highly touted as probably being disunified. Did they get unified? Now you were not there, but you were.
Well,
You were there for a couple days.
I was first 2 days this week. I was at the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia, and then last week, along with Bruce, I was there for the entirety of the Republican Convention in Cleveland. And the thing I would say about that is, I think what's interesting. David Wasserman of Cook Political Report said this, and I thought it was apt. That what you have in many respects is mirror images of each other. You have in the Republican Party a relatively unified voting bloc for Trump and a completely fractured Republican leadership elite. And on the Democratic side, it's actually the inverse. We saw earlier in the week, especially with the Sanders delegates, that they are having a hard time coming to terms with the way this election played out for them. And there's more division. We even heard rumblings of it at various moments yesterday still. And then the Democratic leadership is, lock stop behind Hillary Clinton. So it's an interesting inversion, I think.
We know that the Russians already proved that to us, right? that they're all behind Hillary. But yes, is it a mirage or is it real? This what appears to be move toward unity.
Well, everybody tries to move towards unity, but I look at the convention I was at, and I look at the convention I've watched on television. I mean, Donald Trump, there was no one in the audience that was booing Donald Trump. There were people that basically booed Hillary Clinton's name in the early days with Bernie Sanders supporters. So I think the animus and the depth of people in the party that aren't enthusiastic about Hillary, I think the numbers are larger, at least in the Democratic Convention electorate, than in the Republican electorate at the moment. Although, obviously, a lot of people, with the exception of Ted Cruz, who did not like Donald Trump, they didn't take the time to go there and boo him, whereas Bernie Sanders supporters did, many of them who were delegates.
And I think the real question, though, is what happens after Hillary Clinton delivers her acceptance speech. And you know, conventions historically, as both of you know, have been fraught with fractured moments, this year perhaps more than we've seen in recent years. But nevertheless, what they're designed to do is to create that sense of propulsion into the fall, to introduce the nominee, or reintroduce as the case may be, to the country, and to make sure that everybody is in lockstep. So everything you've seen happen over the course of this week in particular has been designed to try and bring more of the Sanders supporters into the fold and to have that party unified. So even though there was division on Monday, I think the question will be, can Hillary Clinton herself help close the deal that Bill Clinton and President Obama tried to set up for her going into tonight?
Another thing, just to pick up on a point you made earlier, and that's to talk about the Russian issue. I think it's been interesting to see the media react this week to when the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton says on the Sunday shows that he believes, or experts, unnamed experts that nobody asked who they were, experts had said that the Russians and WikiLeaks perhaps were together. They conspired to release this information to help Donald Trump. That's what they said. Now, what the media has done is they picked up on that story. They basically bought the unnamed experts. They've sold that story, and everybody's now picked up on those talking points. And then, of course, a couple of days ago, Donald Trump steps right back into it when he makes his comments, talking about Russia. But when he was talking about Russia, he was talking about Russia being able to find the 33,000 emails that Hillary Clinton has deleted, and that's what he was talking about. He was not calling for them to hack everyone. He was talking about whether or not, and I think he did it in somewhat of a jovial way, but again, it got picked up and played entirely different. It was entirely different. The news coverage was entirely different from what Donald Trump said, because I watched the entire news conference.
I think that is a very important point that you raise, that when I heard that Donald Trump had called for this treasonous act, I hadn't seen the news conference, and I thought, I can't wait to listen to the tape of this. And you start hearing all the clips of tape on all the different media, and nowhere did I hear him say, I am asking the Russians to do this. He just kind of said, maybe they'll find the 30,000, which is I think dramatically different. And it is interesting to me. I don't know, Steve, if you see it this way, but it really does feel like that has something that he never said has been reported and just re-reported. And I find myself in the position of defending Donald Trump on this. He didn't say that, as far as I can tell.
Well, I mean, this is something I think that we have seen grow with increasing concern, frankly, among the media, broadly speaking, where somebody says something that in isolation seems newsworthy, seems controversial, and certainly Trump is a big part of that, and he oftentimes is reported accurately the outlandish statements that many believe he has made. Nevertheless, there is, I think, one of the problems, and we saw it frankly even with the Melania plagiarism issue. We're seeing so many journalists, particularly the 24-hour cable stations, as well as social media, sort of bring incredible attention, talk to death over the course of a 24 or 36-hour period, a particular issue, with no sense of context around it, no sense of import. How many people, we can argue whether it was a significant issue or not, plagiarism. I tend to believe plagiarism is a significant issue. Nevertheless, the question is, what value does that have to how people are going to evaluate whether to vote for Donald Trump? And the media's reaction, I would argue, was wholly disproportionate to the level of import that story had to the overall calculus of the election and how voters are viewing things. So I think we're seeing too much of that this cycle.
The other thing is, I think, because you have a constituent, you have a large portion of the country that believes the news media is basically in the tank for Hillary Clinton and has a liberal bias. But as a journalist, when I watch Chuck Todd, who I generally like, and Jake Tapper, who not so much, when they're interviewing Mr. Mook, the campaign manager, and he uses the word experts, our experts, and not one of the members says, who are your experts? That's journalism number 101. Who are your experts?
You mean experts on whether or not the Russians were involved in the original hack?
He specifically, what are your sources? He specifically says, experts, and then even in the print, it talks about unnamed sources or unnamed experts. This is what people want to know, because I have, by the way, I have said on Beyond the Beltway about 2 months ago, I raised the possibility of the Russians, specifically Putin. What's Putin going to do with all these missing emails? This was before the DNC story. This was about the Hillary email. I said, what mischief is he going to create? I mean, he's got Edward Snowden living in the same city with him. They know lots of secrets.
Would be happy to do a favor for Putin if he could and get him out of there.
When the story came out, it didn't surprise me, but what surprised me was that the media jumped on that story and ran it as gospel without getting any specific. And the other issue, if I could just add one more point, is the issue here is one issue: can Hillary keep a secret? How does she deal with top secret information? The other thing is, why isn't anybody talking about the lack of cybersecurity at the DNC? This happened a couple of years ago.
I would say that I would push back softly on that, because I did see several links that led to pretty detailed websites that had, above my head, technical explanations for why they believe that these ISPs were tied to this and this and you know, kind of went down the rabbit hole. So there were some attributed, I can't attribute them now, but there were attributed conversations about why they thought that happened. It's entirely possible, because the stuff was so intensely geeky, that the people on camera at the time couldn't cite them. I mean, that might be what it is. But I won't go with you as far as to say that it was never attributed who were the technical experts who said that. It's really irrelevant today. It's not, I don't think it's that important, but
in essence, everybody's, the source of the stories now is the campaign manager of Hillary Clinton. That's the source, because he hasn't told us who his experts are, even though he's not an expert.
With that point, I agree, and it's kind of what we've been talking about, and what Steve, I think, it so importantly brings up. I don't want to get all old manish about this, but it is interesting that when we lost large parts of the process of developing a news story, when you had the luxury of 8 hours to develop your news story and have 5 or 6 pairs of eyes look that story over beforehand, it's more likely that there was at least a little more accuracy in it, perhaps. But now we have the luxury of having a million voices, and you can pick and choose. I don't know.
Well, one anecdote that if you and anybody who is watching this program have spent any time watching cable news for an entire day, you know, you're at a place, you're at home, you're at work, you're holed up in a hotel room, and you watch that cycle, and then you go and say the next morning and click on to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, you know, the Chicago Tribune for that matter, and you compare what the editors of those publications saw as the most important stories of the day that just transpired, to those that actually were discussed on cable television. I'm always struck by how stark those differences are. And it's not to say that the Tribune and the Sun-Times and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times are the oracles and they have a monopoly view on this. But it does underscore the sense that what we are overheated about at 2:15 on a Tuesday afternoon may not actually be of real resonant consequence.
I want to underscore what you just said, because as I mentioned, I watched the entire Donald Trump press conference. I was watching cable, I was home watching it on cable TV. I watched the entire thing. And then I saw, not immediately, but you know, several hours later, I saw the breathless reporting about it, including the word treasonous, and that came up in part of the right. I did that. And then later that night, I was reviewing my news feeds of the day, so I decided to read the New York Times story. The New York Times story was, as Steve just said, it was in context. They did not blow it out of the water. They said that maybe he might even have been a little jocular. They made the point that he was talking about her emails, the deleted emails, not deliberately called. So the New York Times got the story correct.
Yeah, it's interesting. It really is. And I got to tell you, just as a personal anecdote, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I downloaded the SiriusXM app onto my personal device, which was probably the biggest, most horrible mistake I've ever made, because now I have MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News in my pocket.
You've got the audio just piped into you.
And I can't, it's just crack cocaine. I can't stop. I listen to it constantly. And it's so much fun to jump between MSNBC and Fox and you know, just the completely different worldviews that you're seeing. But it puts nothing in context. It lives exactly in the moment. It's just, what are we talking about right now? Oh my God, let's get a panel of 5 people and let's talk about that one thing and talk about it for 20 minutes.
5 people, it's usually like 9 people.
Well, right.
CNN's got 9 people in there.
Right.
Including David, who's doing a wonderful job, David Axelrod.
And what happens is you just fall into the rabbit hole with it. It's like, oh wow, I can't wait for the next. Give me another bite. The little mouse, you know. Like,
Another just story is that a lot was said about Joe Biden's speech the other night. And by the way, he did terrific. All the speeches I think have been very well by the major players. Tim Kaine, I'm not sure he needs a little more work, I think.
Well, he's got,
but he's new. It's first time in the spotlight. You give him a break on it. But what the news media did not report last night, and maybe they just they felt they gave Trump too much time earlier in the day with the press conference. They were not reporting, although Tom Lemus from ABC reported, he tweeted that last night, opposite Joe Biden, that Donald Trump was speaking to the largest, most enthusiastic audience since the primaries in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden's hometown. I didn't see any video of that report at all.
That's interesting, because I did hear that he was speaking last night in Scranton, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that part.
That's what Tom Lemus reported,
wow.
At least on his Twitter feed.
Wow. So the demonstrators, were they? You were there Monday and Tuesday. Were they louder and more dominant on the floor than we saw and heard in the live coverage? I couldn't figure it out.
Well, I should say very clearly that at the moment where the demonstrations were at their most pronounced, I personally was not on the floor. I was outside at another venue with another event going on. So I can't speak to that question specifically. I will say that my colleagues who were inside were reporting both at the Bernie Sanders rally earlier in the day on Monday and on the floor that it was loud and intense, and that it was unpredictably so, and that it wasn't just an isolated portion, and it was audibly noticeable. It was the overwhelming presence in the hall, and I think that translated fairly well to television.
Yeah.
I will say it's interesting watching. There were moments last week in Philadelphia when I was inside the hall, moments when I was watching outside the hall as we were sharing different credential opportunities with students that we were with and other staff. And things resonate obviously differently on television than they do in the hall in powerful ways. But this was not one of those distinctions that according to my colleagues, it came through as loud, if not louder, in the hall than it did on television.
Yeah, I think that's the case as well, because they're controlling the pots. I thought at both conventions, at least, the Democratic convention that I watched on TV, they had the music too up.
Yes.
You
can't hear the crowd.
You couldn't even hear the crowd. Yeah. The one thing that was very audible last night, and I think it threw him, was when Leon Panetta, the former CIA director, was speaking. Clearly, he was being disrupted and interrupted. And if you're not used to that type of venue, which I don't think he is, you could be thrown by it. And I think he was thrown by. I think No More Wars was a chant that was going out. And frankly, at one point, I thought a group was saying Trump, Trump, Trump. At least that's what it sounded like. And because then the chants of USA came up, which usually is how you try to combat
that lets you know
elements.
that the other side is
That's
getting
right.
ticked off, right? Whichever side it is.
That's
right. One of my dreams is to convene a panel of audio mix experts and do a takedown on all of these events that we've been seeing lately, because I think, well, we can't spend time on this, but there was a very interesting conversation that erupted in some of the tech sites recently about the scream, because when you, I got it, his name just escaped me.
Howard Dean.
Howard Dean. When you listen to that, if you've been around these things for a while, if you've been a working reporter for a while, you understand about mult boxes, right? That mult box is a thing that all the cameras plug into. Well, in the case of Howard Dean, and I think they actually talked to some people who set that up, Howard Dean's microphone was the only thing that was appearing in that mult box. There was all kinds of other stuff going on in the room, but there were not ambient sounds being mixed in. And so what you got was a guy who is screaming into the microphone, trying to get heard over a very loud crowd. And what you hear is distorted from the reality of the room. And I think I heard that a dozen times in both of the conventions.
I think a key point is going to be Hillary Clinton's speech tonight. Can she give a speech without screaming? You compare her speech with Elizabeth Warren. Now, people say Elizabeth Warren maybe was a little underwhelming, but her modulation, she knows how to work a microphone. Joe Biden last night knows how to work a microphone. You go in, he was whispering to the home audience, but he knew how to, as is the president. But most of the speakers at both conventions, including Donald Trump, they have some reason to believe that you have to scream into a microphone, which is wrong.
I'm glad you raised this point, because I was just going to go to it. I think this is one of the really, really challenging things for speaking to a large audience there, where you actually cannot, in some cases, hear yourself. You feel psychically that you have to overproject because you're in front of, 35, 40,000 people. You're forgetting that the microphone is there doing the work for you. And as a result, the vast majority of speakers at both conventions and the vast majority of speakers at these kinds of venues, rallies, are just awful at it. They don't create that sense of intimacy and that sense of connection that you saw with two you mentioned, that you saw last night with President Clinton, President Obama at times, with President Clinton, who was in particular kind of in that intimate storytelling space. And I think that, above and beyond sort of making that personal connection, Hillary Clinton would do very, very well to follow your advice, to kind of just make this a talk, make this a conversation. She will improve her ability.
It's especially difficult when you add into the fact that she's a woman.
And some of this is absolutely gendered.
You get that shrieking argument, But a lot of it is the experience that you have to have done 3 or 4 of those speeches in front of 20,000 people in order to understand how to use the microphones in a way that's completely counterintuitive. And Obama and Bill Clinton and they know how to do it. And interestingly, Trump doesn't know how to do it. He hasn't had that experience.
No, he's not had that experience.
He's inexperienced. And so when everybody talks about how he was yelling, and he was obnoxious about it, some of it is mic technique. But we digress.
But the real question is, what is going to happen with the Bernie supporters? We saw the kind of controversy that happened on Monday night.
Hold on a second. How did you get here?
I just materialized. You know about Harry Potter?
Through the magic of digital editing, ladies and gentlemen, Jacky Grimshaw has joined us. I'm so happy you're with us. Jacky Grimshaw, Center for Neighborhood Technology, political animal of long-standing with Harold Washington administration, lots of other things. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Yes, I was saying that I think the only big question is the Bernie supporters. I was really surprised when they were booing Secretary or Defense Secretary Panetta last night. Here he was talking about what was going on in the world. That's going to affect them, whether or not they support Hillary or not. And the disrespect, I guess, is what gets me more than anything else. I'm a passionate person. You know that. In politics, I have candidates. When my candidates lose, I'm crushed. So I know that feeling. But I don't see the need to be disrespectful. I think that's what's most disappointing to me. And I hope tonight that they don't disrespect Secretary Clinton either.
And that is a big question. What do you guys? Do you think is that possible that they will not interrupt?
Well, if somebody disrespects her tonight, I mean, that is the story of the week. Because again, it shows disunity. I would be dumbfounded if Hillary is disrupted in any way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that what she has to do tonight, and she has a delicate dance to walk. She has to at once reach out to the progressive wing of the party, the Bernie Sanders wing. She also has to move and start to appeal to the independent voters who will largely decide this election. And she has to also at once talk about her as a continuity factor to the Obama administration, but also that she is a change agent, as her husband tried to make the case for the other night. Those 4 poles, frankly, the progressive independent dance and the continuity change dance, I think are very, very difficult. And she has to do it in a way that makes her relatable, makes her connected in a narrative that people can be drawn into, that validates what the other testifiers have said on her behalf this week. And the last thing is she is following one of the most extraordinary lineups of political speakers in our time, leaving politics aside to follow Michelle Obama, to follow Bill Clinton, to follow Barack Obama, not to mention, Bernie in his own way and Elizabeth Warren and the others. This is an extraordinarily difficult moment for her. It's the most important political speech without that, and this will be a true test for how she can position herself and the party going forward.
I think she has an impossible role to play tonight, really impossible. And I think she has to, at least for tonight, I think she has to forget about the several thousand people in the audience in hopes that the Bernie people will eventually come back to her when the time comes to vote. I think she has to work to the home audience. I think, first of all, she's got to be likable. I don't think she's going to erase the trust issue. That's going to take a long time. If you lose trust, it's hard to get that back. She has got to become likable. And I think she has the ability to do it. I've seen her do it with some self-deprecating humor. She has to be likable tonight. That's a challenge that transcends all of the other subdivisions that Steve just referenced.
The one thing about Hillary, I got to interview her when I was doing the show with that at WBEZ, and I was prepared, to really push her and grill her. One of the things I discovered, she's tough as nails. There was no shaking her, there was no getting her off point, any of the rest of that. But after the interview, talking to her off mic, so to speak, she is a very warm person. If she just lets herself be viewed tonight, without trying to compete with Barack or compete with Michelle or compete with Bill Clinton, just be Hillary. And I think, that likability will come through because she is, on a personal level, very likable. In some ways, she's like Al Gore. They always said Al Gore was stiff. Al Gore, again, was a very personable person. He just didn't show up when he was on the big stage.
I think that's a really important point. It's not that she has to try to top or to in some way appropriate the style of the other speakers. She has to be authentically herself. And that's been, I think, a challenge for her as a candidate. Find really her own voice, the thing that actually connects so many people to her deeply. These stories of warmth, this idea that she is a very, very relatable person. And Bruce, to your point, a lot of the Clinton campaign strategists this week were responding both offline and in more public ways to this question of trustworthiness. And they kept answering this question around likability, relatability, saying if we can do better on measures such as understands people like me, appreciates the concerns of the middle class, will fight for my values, those kinds of measures. And if she can do that going forward and tonight begin to open up the space around that, they feel that they can overcome the trustworthy challenges that she has on that question.
Two moments of that. One was last Saturday when she was introducing Tim Kaine, and they had her, I thought there was a nice piece of stagecraft. They had her sitting on a stool next to and behind him. And I thought to myself, after watching her for 30 years, I've never seen that smile before. That was real. That was the genuine article.
She was very happy last Saturday.
She was enjoying herself, and she looked like she just looked more human. And I think last night, the hug.
Oh, yeah, that was awesome.
The look on her face was like, this is it. This is my moment. I mean, there was something there.
One other thing really quickly to say about it. I was struck by not just the photo in that moment, or the photo op, I should say, of President Obama and Hillary Clinton last night in a powerful way, but it's also true that in the two of them, and particularly President Obama, this is the first election campaign in a long time where an incumbent president has not only offered to campaign so heavily on behalf of his party's nominee, but has been welcomed to do so, where he is seen as an asset, where the baggage is not a controlling weakness.
He better be, because he is.
and that's unique. You have to think back. Maybe Reagan Bush. But Reagan was not in his full self at that point in time.
That's right.
So it's been a long time since she's had that kind of asset. And the other interesting thing is how the administration sort of squares his likability ratings, which are very high, and are actually running counter to the right track, wrong track measures. So there's a sense that people feel like we're on the wrong track, and yet they love this president, or on a relative basis do. Can she translate that into an effective argument for her?
No, I think that's a real key point, is that in some cases he is her biggest asset, but when you see her with him, it's a continuation, it's a third term of him, and you're right, he's popular as a person, but again, right track, wrong track. This is one of the worst right track, wrong tracks for the incumbent party, probably in 30 or 40 years.
But ironically, though, wouldn't you think that, as I've been asking this question all the time, if we just changed the Constitution today and he ran for a third term, he'd win, wouldn't he?
I think so.
Yes, I think that's right. But one of the things that I think this right track, wrong track is that Donald Trump and his friends have been extremely effective in painting a narrative of negativity. Like if you listen to him, last week at the convention, it was all negative, all dark. And they keep putting that out there. The same way they have their caricature Hillary Clinton. They have made her into something that she isn't. And that has come mostly from the rhetoric that has gotten a lot of attention, a lot of media attention. It gets into the news cycle, and that's all you hear is that, he comes up with these crazy crooked Hillary, lying Hillary, just like he did to Ted Cruz. And so, that's what she has to overcome. Not that she is not trustworthy, she has to overcome the rhetoric that's out there that she's not trustworthy.
But she also has to overcome this sense of real anxiety, this sense that that the system, economic, cultural, media, government, is not working for a significant portion of Americans, that the recovery hasn't benefited them, that the institutions that exist to serve all the people are not functioning in the way that they have. And he has effectively channeled that. I think the rhetorical question in 1980 was, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? The rhetorical question this time is, do you feel safer? And by safe, I mean economic security, terrorism, the whole lot of things.
Do you think you're going to live through the next week?
Yeah.
And he has masterfully tapped into that in a way that is very, very palpable. And I think she has the fight of her life on her hands.
I think also she's in a tough situation also because she has to defend Barack Obama. She also has to defend the policies of Bill Clinton. And some of those policies of Bill Clinton, primarily in the criminal justice and in the trade areas, hurt him, hurt her rather, in African American communities, hurt her in white ethnic communities in Ohio and Western Pennsylvania, and in the Rust Belt, and she's stuck defending those because she was a cheerleader of those.
But see, Bruce, you are repeating the rhetoric that Trump has put out
What's
there.
wrong with that?
No, in terms of the criminal justice in the black community. The black community supported Bill Clinton and those criminal justice issues at the time. Some of the Bernie people made an issue of that because it was part of Bernie's narrative, and Trump picked it up. But the criminal justice system that Clinton put in place is not one of those things that makes it difficult for her to compete and campaign in the black community.
Is the Clinton crime program, the Bill Clinton crime program, the 100,000 police officers, has that not led to over incarceration in the United States?
Oh, the thing is that at the time that was happening, the violence in the black community, the crack that was going on in the black community, were all things that folks in the black community wanted dealt with. And so that he was responding to the mood of the community at the time.
So it's an unintended consequence.
That's exactly what happened, but it was not because people opposed him and they're not holding it against her.
No, it was also a bipartisan effort. I mean, 3 strikes and you're out. I mean, it was hard to not follow through on that.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is that
what about in trade though?
Oh, trade's another thing, but she's already said that NAFTA was bad. She's agreed that NAFTA hasn't produced, again, talking about unintended.
That is a very difficult walk back.
Exactly, but he was president. I mean, she wasn't president, at the time, and she's made her walk back, as you want to call it, on the TPP, so that, she is learning. And that, to me...
But Terry McAuliffe said she's going to flip on that.
Well, Terry McAuliffe, he was speaking out of turn.
That's what makes news.
Yeah, exactly. And her campaign,
one of those 9-person panels.
Her campaign right away said that Terry McAuliffe is not in the loop in terms of her policies on TPP. But the thing is that
that's not one of the things she's going to flip on.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm just saying he didn't get the memo.
We're
flipping on other things.
You're talking about Terry. Okay. Yeah, but I think it's to me it says that as a politician, as a person, if you can learn from the facts that are presented, the impacts that are presented, that to me says that you're a smart person. It's not that you are a flip-flopper. That you get that name, you change your position, you're a flip-flopper, but sometimes it makes sense to change your position because you haven't been going in the right direction.
I don't think anybody has called her a flip-flopper. I mean, the great challenge on the issue of trust is what videotape we have of her saying one thing and juxtaposed to what the FBI director says in testimony. So I mean, that's, to me, there's like 5 just absolutely drop-dead gotcha moments that I think we're going to see a lot of in the television commercials between now and November.
Can I just radically change the topic to Rahm Emanuel, who is the favorite topic at this particular table? All this national stuff, it's nice, it's interesting, but it's Rahm Emanuel that we talk about here. Rahm Emanuel got thrown under the bus last night in such a spectacular way in that video. Have you seen the video? Have you guys watched the video? Well,
yes.
I mean, David Axelrod,
the Obama video.
The Obama introduction video.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
The introduction video features David Axelrod saying, and I'm sorry I can't quote it. I was going to transcribe it and I didn't have a chance. But essentially, they're saying the president is such a great leader because even though he had people around him saying, we don't want to do health insurance right now, we got other things to do, he showed leadership and he went ahead and did it. And there's video, there's B-roll of Rahm Emanuel standing in front of the desk in the Oval Office having a conversation with him, which of course you would be led to believe is him lecturing the president on why he shouldn't do this.
It's so interesting. I did not read it that way, although I grant you that read, only because I know from listening to David tell his own stories and for other
I should say
and others who've recounted what was going on, and David has been quite clear, that at that moment in the Obama presidency, coming out of the bailouts, coming after TARP, coming after the economic crisis, that that juxtaposed with a historical record on presidential administrations that have tried to expand health care was a total political loser. And David has told in his book and many other times that he walked into the president and said, this is a political loser. 7 presidents tried, 7 presidents failed. The numbers on this are terrible. And that the president's response at the time was, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to put my approval rating on a mantle and admire it, or draw down on that and try and get something done for the American people? But there's no question that the reality, and this isn't your point's really about Rahm standing within the party, but I will just say to convey that story that there were a lot of people within the administration who were not sold on this as the right policy move at that political moment.
Yeah,
and it was true that the president pushed on.
But I don't think that's quite my question.
My question Yours is about where
did
Rahm
the people who wrote the script for that introductory video that was played in front of 30 million people last night intend to use Rahm Emanuel as the example of kind of weak-kneed people in the administration who were yammering away about how he shouldn't do it, but he showed leadership and did it?
I don't think hardly anyone watching that video knew who that little guy was in front of the president. I mean, we all know who he is, but I don't think that's necessarily how the public is going to react. The point is, I think it showed, as the video was intended to show, here was the president standing up for what he believed in against political advisors that were saying you may be creating a problem here. And he
I will say this.
He made the politically.
I will say this really quickly. I'm sorry to jump in, Jackie. Just that one of the most fascinating aspects to both political conventions, and I think especially true on the Democratic side this year, is not what's happening on the floor with the National Party, but what's happening inside the state delegation. In every convention year, and this one in particular, we saw it earlier this week with the jockeying for governor, it's the undercard of jockeying for position and currying favor and testing the waters and throwing out trial balloons around who might run for mayor, who might run for governor, who might run for a Senate seat. And because there is so much activity on that question for both the next Chicago mayor and governor, it suggests that Rahm has lost so much of the political influence that he would have had 4 years ago to really drive that conversation.
Well,
he's not driving that conversation.
Tony Preckwinkle was sitting next to Bill Clinton.
Yes. Yes.
Chuy Garcia wasn't there, and neither was.
I love Cass's headline on his column. Did Bill Clinton just tell Tony Preckwinkle she can have Chicago?
And it's not just that she was there. You can imagine a scenario where if Rahm were a wildly popular Chicago mayor, that he would have been in that seat.
Oh,
right?
without
Given how close he is to everybody.
I mean, he's in the
Well, to be fair, I don't think he was there on Monday.
Well,
he was not.
And why was that? He had something much more important to do, right?
Oh yeah, we got to make
because
sure
he knew
open.
he wasn't going to be sitting next to Bill Clinton.
He was reviewing documents on IPRA. No, I mean, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just making too much of this, but that's what this show is. We are, Chicago Newsroom, and it just seemed to me that this was I'm saying this with a grin on my face. Actually, I feel kind of bad for the guy. I mean, this is a fairly spectacular snubbing, I would say, by the Democratic Party from a guy who was once a very big deal in the Democratic Party. Am I overreaching here?
I think so.
I think so too.
So.
Okay, good.
Yeah. The thing is that, I watched the video, and actually my focus was on the president. I didn't even notice who was standing in front of his desk. So it may have been subliminal, but, I didn't catch it. So you were watching it much more closely than I was.
I've been put in my place.
I will say, given the show, it was remarkable watching the president on Wednesday night not only deliver that speech where he attempted to blunt the Trump animating question around anxiety and fear with a call to the shared values that unite us. But more importantly, I think for those of us here, it was also remarkable to think it was 12 years ago that he gave that speech in 2004. And frankly, less than 20 years, was it 18 years, since he began his foray into politics. And to think about the arc of that career on the south side of Chicago as a community organizer, as somebody that all of us interacted with at various points.
Beginning with a spectacular loss.
Right.
Exactly, to Bobby Rush in 2000 for that first congressional district seat. And to be finishing up 8 years as President of the United States, the first African-American president, an extraordinary journey, extraordinary moment to think about for all of us who were part of watching that chronicle unfold.
I think I could not agree with you more, that 12-year journey, much of it because a great speech given in Boston in 2004. He then became, and I think everyone would agree, he became a darling of a national media movement that saw him as the first African-American president, which he became. And that is a remarkable political story in history. However, in addition to that, I think we have to look at Donald Trump, who in 13 months went from a presidential announcement to the Republican nominee for President of the United States. And to pick up on something you said, you could say all the negative things, much of which is deserved for Donald Trump. He probably is the best marketer ever to run for President of the United States. And marketing generally succeeds.
Well, let's hope not.
I've been asking that question a lot lately. Is Donald Trump the Barack Obama of 2016? I mean, it's in many ways.
No. Say he's a political phenomenon, not the Barack Obama.
Okay.
I mean, no comparison.
But you would acknowledge he's a political phenomenon. I mean, that 13-month experiment, that's never happened anywhere in the history of the country before.
I would agree. I don't think anyone back July of last year thought that Donald Trump would be the nominee of the Republican Party. It was just too outrageous a thought to think that this, huckster, in a way, this carnival barker would end up being the nominee of the Republican Party.
The road is strewn with political experts. Everyone
defying
this
every
is the
piece
last.
of conventional
Right.
wisdom
Exactly.
around campaigning that we have come to believe in the last.
That's right.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. 270 is the number, right?
Right.
Okay.
Somebody will get there.
Well, unless Veep has been writing the script for everything, the TV show Veep, and maybe that's what's going to happen. It'll be tied and it'll go to the Senate or something.
It would be no. I would say that at this particular point in time, I believe that Donald Trump will be elected president of the United States. As of this moment in time, yes.
And
That's because he's a giant marketer?
That's part of it. He has been able.
Let me stop for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
You are often partisan in your presentations. Are you speaking as a partisan, or are you speaking as the political expert that I respect you so much for being?
I think hopefully the latter, because I'm looking at the figures. The one thing is, everyone around this table, we live in the same community. We tend to talk to the same people.
I totally
we
agree with
socialize with the same people, and I will tell you that the people who I spent time with in Cleveland represent a much broader pool of people who can vote, and they don't think like a lot of people around this table.
I totally
and so
get
I
that.
think by being in Chicago, by being in Illinois, it's tough to sort of see beyond that. But I don't just mean Palatine and Arlington Heights. I mean an entire country. And when you have someone who has a trust deficit, as does Hillary Clinton, campaigning is not her strong suit, running against a phenomenal marketer who I believe has some issues on his side and has been able to tap into those issues because the American people are thinking of those issues.
Because he understands, he's got his finger
Because he
on
understands them better than she does.
Not because
And it
he's
is-
one of them, but just
No,
because
no.
he's good at it.
Because he understands it, and because of those dynamics, and I've said for years, because I'm on in Youngstown, Ohio. I said, you draw a circle of 200 miles around Youngstown, Ohio, you're going to decide who the next president of the United States is. It's Western Pennsylvania, and it's portions of Michigan, and certainly and Idaho. That Rust Belt.
Interesting.
That's where he's going to focus his attention, and I think the Rust Belt. I truly believe that Pennsylvania and Ohio, which always is, I believe Pennsylvania is in play. If Pennsylvania is in play, the possibility of Donald Trump being elected goes up considerably.
Now, see, the thing that the non sequitur for me and what you just said is that you're in Cleveland talking to the country, but you're not in Philadelphia talking to the country. So how can you make this assessment of what the country represented by the people in Philly are thinking versus the country represented by the people in Cleveland are
Because
thinking?
I live in Chicago, and the people that were in Philadelphia are very similar to the people in Chicago, and I have been to at least 4 Bernie Sanders rally. I know the spirit of the Bernie Sanders voter. I was at the Auditorium Theater on the eve of the Illinois primary, and I heard 4,000 Bernie Sanders supporters boo the name of Hillary Clinton when mentioned by Bernie Sanders. And I've said numerous times, I don't know how those 4,000 Illinoisans, now again, a majority of them will likely go for Hillary Clinton. She needs more than just a slight majority of those to go for her. That's where I think the issue is. And again, if those people really want to reform a party, and I think you know this, Jackie, if you want to reform a party, you're not going to reform a party that wins a presidential election. Reform comes when people lose a major office.
And that speaks to actually some numbers here. So what gives Democrats some comfort is the idea that they've won the popular vote at the presidential election 5 out of the last 6 times. They look at states that they won during those times. You add up those states, and I don't have the exact number, but it's roughly 220, 230 electoral votes.
Kind of a base.
You look at the same for Republicans, it's about 114, something like that. So they look at that and they say, that's terrific. You add to that the demographic numbers, and you say, in 1988, George H.W. Bush won about 60% of the white vote in a landslide. Mitt Romney won the same percentage of white voters and lost pretty handily to President Obama. And they say, we've got demographics on our side. I think, though, Bruce, you're talking about something that as the political scientist V.O. Key talked about, is a critical election where the tectonic plates can shift, the coalition shifts, and therefore all of the mapping and math can shift underneath it. And I do believe, and we've seen some recent polls that suggest that Donald Trump will be very, very competitive in all of those Rust Belt states. So that augurs well for Republicans. He could remake this map. Many of the people I talked to in Philadelphia and Cleveland who are looking at demographics, though, say that while he may do better in the Rust Belt, he has some weakness in the Sun Belt, so he could look. The other thing is college-educated whites and non-college educated whites. Hillary Clinton is running even and slightly ahead among Donald Trump with college-educated whites. No Democrat has actually won college-educated whites in history, an astonishing figure I was unaware of. In all of history, they have not won college-educated whites.
Fact. Yeah.
So they're looking at that. However, part of this is also about the overall composition of the electorate. If, according to Cornell Belcher, who did polling for Barack Obama, if the percentage of the electorate is 70% white or less, the Democrats will do very, very well, that Hillary Clinton should win. If the percentage of the electorate is 74% or higher, then it will be very, very good for Trump. So all to say,
it's that difference between 70 and 74.
Yes, of the percent of the total turnout on Election Day. So a lot of what we're going to see over the next couple of months is focus on non-college and college-educated white voters, mobilizing them. Trump has shown great power in appealing to them. And I think there's too much real estate to make a prediction now, but I think that what the polls show and what the last 2 weeks have shown is that this is still very, very much in play. What the president urged is don't take this for granted, and what Trump was trying to do is to bring a party together behind him and say, I can be your voice for change, and that's what's needed here. Yeah.
I also think when you look at the last Republican presidents or candidates for president, you've got Mitt Romney, you've got George Bush, you have Bob Dole, or John McCain, you have Bob Dole. Three of those four, and I would put George W. Bush in that category. You have four Republican white men who speak a certain way. Not one of them knows how to go for the jugular. Not one of them. They're all decent, honorable, good country club Republican
kind of silk
guys.
Stocking type.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's not who the Republicans have sent to the post this time.
Right.
They want a slasher. They want someone that's going to go for the jugular. He's already demonstrated he can do that, and well, I've made my prediction. Am I the only one that's going to make that prediction?
No, I
Steve has deferred.
No, Hillary's going to win.
actually,
Okay, there we go.
I would say.
Actually, I wasn't
the metrics
really
and
asking
numbers
for predictions.
would lean, in my estimation, toward Hillary at this moment. But I think that everything that you said, Bruce, is absolutely in play, and I don't think that either campaign can take this for granted. There's nothing sewn up about this. The debates will be probably the single most watched television event of the year.
Oh, absolutely.
And arguably
Maybe
quite
ever.
consequential in answering some of these questions. that you
Well,
posed.
I mean, we really have to kind of wrap this up, but that was my last question: is the debates? I mean, they just seem the stakes on these debates are, and I don't mean Trump stakes. They're just it's beyond comprehension. I mean, one little slip, one misspoken word.
Well, I'm not sure if that's the case. I mean, given what Donald did yesterday with the Russians, and we'll see whether or not it shows up in the polls. But it seems like throughout the Republican debates, he said all kinds of things that one would think, like standing in the middle of Broadway and shooting a gun off.
Yeah.
One would think that would say, oh my gosh,
Right.
but it didn't affect him. So I'm not sure if things are going to turn on a phrase or a word
If I could say,
in these debates.
earlier in this program, I gave some advice to Hillary Clinton. You will recall that.
Yes,
I think it was good advice to Hillary Clinton.
and I think it was bipartisan and meant in a good spirit.
Right. I'm going to give some advice to Donald Trump. I've done it on my radio show. I'm going to do it here. Donald Trump should be out front, suggesting and demanding that Jill Stein of the Green Party and Gary Johnson of the Libertarian Party be included, and that the presidential debates be with four candidates. If someone is on a ballot in the mathematical number of states it takes to get to 270, they should be on, whether they're at 3% or 15%, they should be in the debate. He should be out there pushing it, because even if it doesn't happen, he will be perceived by some of the Bernie Sanders supporters and some even progressives on the left as the guy that at least wants to level the playing field.
And if either one or both of them are on, then Trump wins.
That could be a secondary point that might come out of that.
Ralph Nader.
It was very interesting the other night watching the Bill Maher thing during the Republican during the Republican debate when I'm having my moment again.
Bill Maher?
No, Michael Moore.
Yeah. Michael Moore.
Michael Moore, sitting in this extremely lefty bastion, just kind of started getting really obnoxious and just saying, "You're all idiots, essentially. You don't know what you're talking about. We live in bubbles that are so constricted and so confined. We don't," he said, "I don't know one person who is going to vote for Donald Trump. I don't know one. But yet, it looks like most of the country is going to vote for Donald Trump. So, we're the problem here. We are not." And that raises
That's part of the get out the vote effort by the Democrats.
That raises the issue of participation. And participation is going to be such a big deal in this, because my sense of it is that Donald Trump's participation is already baked in. The people who like Donald Trump, man, they are going to be out there. But Hillary Clinton is a whole different thing.
Yeah. Well, let me just, if I can bring it back to where we started, I also think that there's something interesting about the bubble you're talking about. It comes back to media. And in part because of some of the forces we were alluding to or talking about before, fewer and fewer reporters have the time or even the understanding that it might actually be a good idea to go out and travel the country and talk to voters, see what they're thinking. The water cooler consensus in Washington told us all in the country the same thing we were telling ourselves, which was Jeb Bush, Donald Trump's campaign won't get out of its own driveway. And it's another argument for how we have to, particularly as those of us that have been in the news media and in journalism, to go out, do the work, shoe leather, talk to people and understand what their concerns are. Beyond the Beltway.
The problem is it's hard and it's expensive and somebody has to pay for that, right? But let's not have a journalism discussion. For heaven's sakes, let's not do that. I did want to just spend a minute or talking about the comedian's role in all of this, and we really have to wrap it up. But I find it really interesting that everybody's doing all the live stuff afterward. I mean, like there's 5 or 6 all competing. But it's the bubble, because it is 100% anti-Trump. I mean, it's just assumed that the Donald is this big orange buffoon and we don't have to take him seriously, but we're going to make fun of him. And I don't know, maybe Bruce, you have some explanation. Why aren't there right-wing or conservative comedians? Why don't we have that? I mean, Ann Coulter, I don't put that in. I don't think she's quite in the same category.
Well,
why isn't there a right-wing Stephen Colbert?
I don't know why they're just not that funny. They're all on talk radio.
That's true. They're all on AM.
Rush Limbaugh is out there, but the point is,
he's kind of a comedian.
The other thing is,
you can ask the same question. Why was there never a liberal Rush Limbaugh?
Well, the point is that also when you're putting these post or these analytical panels together, why is it in some cases 5, 6, or 7 people representing one political spectrum, and then you'll have Mr. Lord representing Donald Trump? I mean, it's 5, 6, or 7 to 1, but
he does have a laptop in front of him.
He does have a laptop, and he was in breaking some news last night. But I'm just saying is that in itself, because for every one of those post shows, and by the way, let me just say that the last person I go to listen to in finding out what's happening is I don't go to Sean Hannity. Mm-hmm. Sean Hannity is incapable of asking a hardball question to anybody. But the point is, both sides could do a better job of having a few more people who are representative, because the people out in TV land, they know what's going on. And that's why so many of them gravitate to Fox, because they at least agree with what Fox is saying. They don't even give the other channels a chance to be objective and present a case.
You want to all come back again next week and just spend an hour talking about Fox and Roger Ailes? And I mean, the impact that Roger Ailes has had on this country, on our lives, is almost immeasurable. And the thought that he's just poof, gone, is a very intriguing thought. But we don't have
didn't
time.
Donald pick him up? Isn't Donald?
Oh yeah, he's going to be the campaign manager. That's
for
right.
Donald. So he hasn't gone poof.
He will
He's
be out
just
there
changed
quietly.
chairs.
He's just planning the comeback of Mike Douglas.
Well, to say that I've enjoyed this show today would be an incredible understatement. Jacky Grimshaw, thank you for just materializing out of nowhere.
I know, I'm a Harry Potter fan, you know. I know how to do that stuff.
Jacky Grimshaw from Center for Neighborhood Technology, and a political, just political animal.
Junkie.
Yeah, political junkie, been around for a long time. And Steve Edwards has been here too, now with the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago, executive director over there, works with Mr. Axelrod, and I gotta say, you guys do some great programming. It's really, really fun to go there and see that. And of course, Bruce DuMont, who needs no introduction or benediction. He's just Bruce DuMont. Google
BeyondTheBeltway.com.
Google Beyond the Beltway, and you will find more than enough Bruce DuMont to fill an entire year. And we hope you'll do that. You can do the same thing with us too. You can go to Chicago Newsroom right here, this address, and do that. And of course, Bruce DuMont was the guy who was on our, I think, second show and said, this show is not valid until you have mugs. So we got mugs. And it worked. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.